I recently talked about my top 10 mounts, more specifically my top 10 ground mounts and how important collecting them is to people. Of course, I also partially covered the evolution of mounts in Burning Crusade with the introduction of flying mounts. No longer were we forced to utilize Flight Masters, at least all the time, but still it opened the world to new things for us to see. We could fly over the tallest mountain, up to the floating islands of Nagrand, across the star-lit skies. The possibilities were endless. But Blizzard didn't really stop there. It wasn't just about the travel possibilities, it was about what we were collecting and traveling on. And Blizzard introduced some really great flyers for us to collect. Some harder to get than others. Since I've already done my top 10 ground mounts video, it was only a matter of time before I talked about my top 10 flying mounts. And I have to say this list was way harder to compile than the ground one was. The options were vast and my head was aloft with the possibilities. So here it is, my top 10 flying mounts. Note that this is my opinion and I'm always down to hear your opinion in the comments below. Let's get this started with number 10. World of Warcraft is all about some dragon mounts. In fact, I have quite a few of them on this list. And one of the more interesting dragon types Blizzard has created as of their second expansion, Wrath of the Lich King, is the Proto-Drake. A primordial ancestor to today's dragons, Proto-Drakes are massive hulking behemoths that, well, kinda walk funny, but hey, I love it. Blizzard would naturally make these guys into flying mounts, all of which I love, but one in particular caught my eye, and that is the Ironbound Proto-Drake mount from Ulduar. Raiding Ulduar and knowing this mount was the meta achievement reward drove me so hard to obtain it. Its slick metal design, its frosty breath, the fact that it literally is razor scale from Ulduar, this mount is extremely pleasing to look at and intense to behold. Being able to fly over the frozen wastelands and forests of Northrend on this mount was easily one of Wrath of the Lich King's biggest highlights for me. Too bad I was a more aggressive 10-man than 25-man raider, so all I had up until TOC was the rusted version, but hey, that's still sexy, right? World of Warcraft has some pretty unique animal life. Ooh, I love me some shovel tusks, baby. But I also love me some hippogriffs. And apparently Blizzard does too, because there are a lot of these freaking mounts. I knew I had to have one on this list, but which one? Which one does it? Is that a freaking purple one? Because I love purple. The moment I laid eyes on the Leyfeather hippogriff, I was stunned and shook to my very foundation. I had to have it. Its beautiful color scheme, its magical appearance, it was everything I wanted in a hippogriff flying mount. Too bad the dropping some Eves achievement is a pain in the butt, and sadly still has continued to deny me the chance to get this mount. But lucky me, I made some new friends who helped me get the footage I needed. A huge thanks to my friends Faye and Hudson for providing me not only the footage for this mount, but also a good little mount off time afterwards. You guys both did me a huge favor and I will never ever forget it. Thank you. Of course, the Leyfeather Hippogryph wasn't the only Legion mount to catch my eyes. It took a lot of work and time, but I finally pushed for the other Legion mount I loved, the Arcanist Manasaber. Getting a cat mount on the Horde is kind of a rarity. Alliance players are lucky enough to have them on the regular, but we sadly have to work a little harder to obtain one. Of course, once Blizzard released this sexy kitty, all Horde hell broke loose to get it. The fact that it's a cat mount that can fly alone wins it tons of awards, but its stellar color scheme and awesome design also take the cake for me as the best cat mount in WoW. I also really love the wings as it kind of gives it this Pegasus feel, and I can't love that anymore. That's freaking amazing. paying real life money for a mount has never really been my fancy. I spend enough money on WoW as is, and it feels a bit much to pay more for it. But at the same time, if you really like something, then I completely understand. Case in point is the WoW card game mounts. Of course, everyone knows the more famous TCG mounts like the Spectral Tiger or the Magical Rooster, both of which are really cool mounts. But the mount that always pulled me in, at least, was the Feldrake. For a hefty $600+ you can ride on this beautiful drake covered in fel green and Sweet Legion symbol to top it off. I love how the fel is the frayed edges of its wings, and I absolutely love the color scheme on this mount. It actually feels like it's being controlled by the Legion. It's so dark and evil looking, and we get to ride on this sexy beast. Big thanks to my friend Thorgerus from Allaria for once again helping me, since he has this mount and I am not lucky enough to own it. I appreciate it greatly that he let me film him. Thanks, buddy. I've made it quite known that I like green stuff, namely fel-infused things, and in my ground mounts video I talked about how much I like the Raven lore. What happens when you fuse those things together though? Well, you get the corrupted Dreadwing, a masterful beauty of a flying mount that gracefully swims through the skies above. From its fel-soaked wings to its burning eyes, and of course that regal crown, this once honorable Arakoa mount has fallen far from grace, at the desire of Gul'dan and the Burning Legion. And you get to fly on one of these bad boys. I am aware that there is a non-corrupted version that came with the WoD Collector's Edition, but I actually really like this one just a little bit more, I think mainly because of the color scheme. I love it so much that when I found out how to actually get it, I farmed the crap out of Apexis crystals and got this guy in like 2 weeks. Quite a grind, but it was worth it for quite a mount. When people talk about dragons in WoW, I always think about the aspects, the great dragons themselves who lead all the drakes. And in particular, I think about my favorite one, Malygos. I was so excited to see him in Wrath of the Lich King, despite the fact that I had to totally murder him. But I was also super excited to see his home, Caldera. Are those drakes with magical runes on them? Ooh. That's right, the Azure Drake mount from Malygos' raid Eye of Eternity is by far my favorite traditional Drake mount. Its aspiring blue color scheme, the beautiful magical runes that are all over its body. It looks like something mystical in nature and majestic to fly upon. Of course, getting this mount with its pretty low drop chance from Mally can be a pain, more so now that it's shared with the less great Blue Drake. Lucky me, I pulled this thing pretty early on, and I've rode it everywhere I've gone pretty much ever since. Thanks, Malygos. Rest in peace, old friend. Flying mounts have come quite a long way since their release in Burning Crusade, and they've become progressively more elaborate. Of course, the first really unique flying mount that I cared about came out, well, in Burning Crusade, and it's still one of my favorites to this date. That mount, of course, is Ashes of Allar. Riding on an ultra-rare Phoenix mount across the beautiful backdrops of Outlands is about one of the sweetest experiences this game offers, and definitely one of the most visually impressive. Allar is one of WoW's most famous flying mounts. Its elegant, well-crafted design, from its beautiful mixes of oranges to its fantastic appearance, there are a few people I'm aware of that don't like this mount. Of course, getting it can be a pain, especially with its measly 1% drop chance off Kel'Thas, but if you pull this sexy beast, consider yourself lucky and happy, and by the end of the day, that's really all that matters. I missed Warlords of Draenor mainly because I had a lot of things going on in my life, especially at that moment in time. Apparently I didn't miss much of it though. It pains me still that I missed anything, even if it was lackluster. I remember the first time I set foot in Mythic Hellfire Citadel, I was so excited as a lore buff to see Archimonde at his finest. It was so thrilling. Oh hey, a mount dropped, wow, and I won it, oh my god. That's literally the exact story of how I got my Felsteel Annihilator, and I greatly appreciate Blizzard for allowing me to have it. I'm a huge fan of robots, I love anime, and mecha anime like Gurren Lagann do things to me. Of course, I also love Fel things, which made me just really like this mount a lot. I love the overall design of the robot, especially compared to the previous mech mounts that Blizzard had released. I mean, this one literally is a miniature Fel Reaver, and I love Fel Reavers. Except that one. That one's a douche. Easily one of my favorite WoW mounts, and I couldn't be more proud to own it. My top 2 mounts are especially special as they were the mounts that I saw and not only had to have, but I needed to ride them, bad. So much so that I would do anything for them. Ever since the introduction of Algalon, my favorite raid boss in WoW history, I've been super obsessed with celestial looking things, like weapons and characters. Of course, Mr. Pandaria just went ahead and blew my pants off now, didn't it? I am of course talking about the Celestial Cloud Serpent mount from Elegon. I remember seeing this mount upon Mr. Pandaria's release and drooling all over my desk. I just had to have it. Its astral body lit up like the night sky, the particle effects that explode off of it like stars hurling across the cosmos. I especially love its mount special animation. The Cloud Serpent mounts do a very elegant but powerful roar, and this one sounds like it's roaring to the heavens. All in all, this mount is one of my favorite mounts in the history of the game, and when I saw it drop, I cried. I cried so much because I had finally got my Star Dragon, and that was all that mattered at that moment. I've talked about a bunch of my favorite flyers all the way up to my number 2 spot, but before we talk about my number 1 spot, let's get some honorable mentions going first. These mounts are pretty awesome, just not quite my top 10 awesome. Alrighty, now on to number 1. Beating a Celestial Dragon isn't an easy task. Honestly, if this mount hadn't imprinted on me so much so, I think the Celestial Cloud Serpent would have easily won this list. But Mimiron's head did what it needed to do. I recall raiding in Ulduar and getting to Mimiron, seeing his 3rd phase floating head form and going, man, I would love that thing as a mount. It looks so cool. Of course, time passed and my Atlas loot didn't display Mimiron dropping such a mount, to my sadness. However, another boss would update to show such a mount, Yogg-Saron, with no lights. That's right, the task may have been long and full of danger, but it was well worth it for a chance to ride on a Titan Keeper's mechanical head. Mimiron's head is just amazing to me. Its cool looking gnomish face, the dope helicopter blades spinning overhead. It is by far my favorite mount, and when I finally got my chance to get this thing, I lost all sense of reality. I cried because of the Celestial Dragon mount, but I broke down because of Mimiron's head. Oh, and I know people hate the loud noises it makes, but honestly, I like that feature. It makes me feel like I'm in a real machine working its hardest to keep me hundreds of feet in the air. It feels alive, and I greatly appreciate the detail on Blizzard's behalf. Thanks, Blizz. Well, that's the list, all top 10 of my favorite flying mounts in World of Warcraft. Naturally, with as many flying mounts as there are, you may not have the same opinion as me. Drop your favorite flying mounts in the comments, I'm always down to check them out, discuss, or debate. If you enjoyed the video, why not subscribe and check out some of my other WoW content videos. I'm Captain Potato, and I'll see you guys next time, next video.